the new CEO, the new president of World Bank, the lucky person. I'm sure he will not stay in the office for a couple of years and leave us without doing significant reform.
And Mr. Prime Minister, you clearly know something I don't know, which is if I'm only here for 2 years as compared to the 5 years I'm supposed to be, then something about you is telling me a message. So I'm hoping I can stick around for the 5.
But why doesn't he just hire an interpreter and use his own language? Didn't they teach him English in Ethiopia? Come on, man. This is a critical evaluation of Prime Minister Abiy's English skills level, and hopefully a lesson to him and probably to others learning the language, which is English. Why did I decide to evaluate and gauge Prime Minister Abiy's English? Well, probably for at least a couple of reasons here. The main one being the fact that the man's solid tendency to awkwardly mimic American accent while saying a word or two without even identifying the basics of English is a disgrace to himself and the people he claims to represent. Also, the Prime Minister is obsessed with unnecessarily and awfully dumping English phrases and sentences while speaking one of his native language when he can effectively express them in the same language that he is on. As you know, English is the most widely spoken language worldwide, and English learners all around the world have different levels of English skills. We can in general put people into 3 broad categories in connection with their English skills: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Since learning a broad subject like the English language is a continuum of developments with vague start or end points, we can further divide each broad category of English skills into multiple subcategories. For the sake of convenience and practicability, one way to designate those subcategories is by splitting each broad category into 5 subcategories. Accordingly, the beginner level can further be split into absolute beginner, baby step beginner, rudimental, mediocre, and beginner itself. Similarly, the intermediate and advanced levels can further be categorized into their subcategories as well. But since our point of focus for now is Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his English skills, we can limit our discussion to just the beginner level. Now, let's briefly explain what each of the beginner level subcategories implies. An absolute beginner of the English language is someone who can hardly read written English. In addition, people in this category don't understand written or spoken English at all. The second subcategory of the beginner level includes people who can somehow read written English but only understand about 10% of what they read. These folks may understand about 5 to 10% of spoken English and begin to construct phrases and or grammatically incorrect short sentences. Moving on to the third category of the beginner level, here we find the rudimental beginner, where people start reading most commonly used words and understand around 15 to 25% of what they read or hear. Constructing and putting together simple and fragmented, short, for the most part grammatically and conventionally wrong sentences is possible, but that comes with a lot of sweat and effort. The next subcategory of the beginner level is the mediocre beginner. The word mediocre is sometimes used to denote negative aspects of people. However, this word is intentionally used here to indicate that this stage of the beginner level is where English learners start feeling that they somehow know something about English and try to show that by applying what they know in real life. This group of people still independently understand only a limited amount of written and spoken English, about 20 to 35%. and still struggle to put together grammatically and conventionally meaningful short sentences. The last group of the beginner level is the beginner. Yes, no descriptive adjective here. When it comes to skills, folks in this group start writing and speaking sort of meaningful but short and simple sentences with 30 to 60% grammatical and conventional mistakes. Although they do so to a certain extent, people in this category still depend on their native language to form ideas and then make a translation in their head before writing or speaking. They can also understand up to 50% of written and spoken English. And that's it. That's all there is to it as far as the beginner level is concerned. We'll discuss the quantitative and qualitative aspects and properties of the intermediate and the advanced levels of English skills in a different session at some point in the future. Now, let's dive into the focus of this session, evaluating and commenting on Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's English skills. Since Abiy Ahmed is extremely disrespectful towards people, I'm not expected here to respectfully evaluate his skills by any measure, right? So, while the facts of this evaluation remain facts, I may use the right words to explain Abiy Ahmed, even though the words may sound somehow offensive. Just a little. As you can imagine, it gets annoying and irritating when someone holding a highly sensitive public position is typically characterized by uncivil and rude behaviors. With that being said, I'm now going to first point out which category the Prime Minister falls under and then explain why. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's English skill is unfortunately very, very, very low and falls under the rudimental beginner level, and with a little effort to learn can move to the mediocre beginner level. There are numerous occasions where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed blatantly uttered words and sentences that clearly explain his superficially poor and comical English. One can also notice that Prime Minister Abiy tries to artificially imitate one or two pronunciations of certain regional patterns, such as the US, with no clue of the right voices of the accent that he's trying to imitate. Let's now jump to the most widely talked about event in Paris, France, where world leaders gathered to discuss a new financing pact, as they called it, while Prime Minister Abiy was exposed out in the open, putting himself on the spot. Undeniably, he found himself in a handful of embarrassing moments. But I'm only focusing for now on his interaction with the new World Bank president. What did Prime Minister Abiy say about the president, and how did the president wisely respond to that? Well, let's first play the first segment of the clip where Prime Minister Abiy talked about the new World Bank leader and his term of appointment.
The new CEO, the new president of the World Bank, the lucky person. I'm sure he will not stay in the office for a couple of years and leave us without doing significant reform.
What you just heard from Prime Minister Abiy is just one simple and elementary sentence, but heavily fragmented into pieces. Anyway, anyone can easily locate at least 10 grammatical and other mistakes within this one simple sentence. I put the main ones as follows in the order in which they appear in the sentence. First of all, when addressing a high-ranking official, especially on a platform with a diplomatic and historical significance, you have to either know the exact title of the official or somehow apologize for, or at least acknowledge, your failure to prepare, which probably is just one click away. But in all honesty, how can you not know the title of the highest position of an organization that you're begging money from? How is that even possible? Then he continued describing the new president of the World Bank as the lucky person in connection with the high-profile appointment of the president. Anyone who hears just that phrase and knows what and who is being referred to immediately realizes that Prime Minister Abiy is not just a tactless and undiplomatic, but also an aimless communicator. In most languages, especially English, respect is at the core of the language. It is a social norm to respectfully treat someone you barely know, let alone in high-class diplomatic platforms at an international level. Let's face it, it's obvious. Prime Minister Abiy is unschooled on the fact that respect is a crucial component of diplomatic and even social interactions. Next, when you're referring to an office as in a position of high-ranking official, it's grammatically wrong to use the article the as in the office.
Stay in the office.
The office refers simply to a room being used as an office, where desks, computers, and other office equipment are located. So you should have instead said stay in office. That's it, not stay in the office. Alright, moving on to the next grammatical mistake that within that very sentence. In the context of the sentence, the word couple should have been preceded by the article a.
For a couple of years and leave us.
Although the word represents plurality in number, it is considered singular as it is taken as a whole. And in this context, the Prime Minister should have said a couple of years to form a grammatically correct phrase. However, the word can be used in many different ways in different contexts. The next or fifth mistake is due to another little vocab and or grammatical knowledge. In the sentence, I'm sure he won't stay in office for a couple of years and leave us without doing significant reforms. The first part of the sentence, won't stay in office, and the next clause, leave us, should never come next to each other at all, or render the whole sentence a senseless piece of gibberish. I can almost guarantee that even a typical rudimental beginner won't make that type of awkward mistake at all. The Prime Minister could have said this sentence in a lot of different ways instead. He could have said, I'm sure the President will have made significant reforms before his term is over, using a future perfect tense. Or he could have said, I'm sure the President will introduce some significant reforms during his term. Or he could have simply said, I wish the new President a productive term of service for introducing some significant reforms. Because that was what the Prime Minister intended to mean. Although what he ended up saying turned out to be rude and offending in a lot of different ways, which is also packed with numerous grammatical and conventional errors. That takes us to the next mistake, still within that same short, simple sentence by Prime Minister Abiy. The word couple in that sentence has a literal meaning of two, the number. Another meaning of the word couple is a form of asserting that something is very small in number, 2 or 3, but not more than 3. So telling someone that his or her authority is only for a small number of years says something corrupt with your personality and can be considered as a red flag for some deep mental disorder. We can also observe the Prime Minister trying hard to imitate American pronunciation without identifying the right types of voices and some subtle nuances. For example, when he was saying the word world, it sounded like he was saying some gibberish that doesn't even exist. We can understand him from the context of what he's saying. It can clearly be noticed that the Prime Minister indistinctly mumbles some words and phrases to sound and look fluent when in fact he's not even close to a full beginner. Such a habit will compromise his communication, although his listeners may figure out somehow what he says. But just because people understand you somehow does not mean that you're communicating right. We can understand what you say using different methods in addition to context like body language, simply guessing what you would say from prior encounters, and many other subtle methods. Although I could have pinpointed even more grammatical and other mistakes within that short sentence of Prime Minister Abiy, those are the ones anyone could see at a glance. To conclude, I just want to say one thing to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, of course. Focus on clarity, substance, and learning the basics first, not superficial sounds and looks.